The billionaire was about to close a deal on a rare Rolex when the waitress interrupted in fluent French, "This is fake," exposing the scam and saving him from a massive fraud. Tell us your city below, then enjoy the story and subscribe for more. Trust me, the ending will leave you speechless. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when Jennifer Torres wiped down table 14 for the 6th time that evening. It was 7:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, and Le Petit Chateau was nearly empty. Just an elderly couple sharing a bottle of Bordeaux by the window, and a businessman typing furiously on his laptop near the back. She didn't mind the quiet nights. They gave her time to think, to remember, to pretend she was somewhere else entirely. 26 years old, and she was still working the same job she'd taken, temporarily, 4 years ago. The tips were decent. $127 on a good night, sometimes $200 if the right clientele came in, but decent wasn't enough. Not when she owed $34,000 in student loans, not when her rent was $1,450 for a studio apartment in Brooklyn that was exactly 389 square feet, including the closet she'd converted into a makeshift office. Jennifer had a degree in art history from NYU with a minor in French literature. She spoke 3 languages fluently, English, French, and Spanish, and could hold a conversation in Italian. She'd spent a semester abroad in Paris, walked the halls of the Louvre 17 times, and written her thesis on the influence of Impressionism on modern advertising. None of it mattered now. To understand why Jennifer Torres was wiping down tables at a French restaurant in Manhattan, instead of curating exhibitions at the Met, you had to go back 8 years, to a hospital room in Queens, where a 17-year-old girl held her father's hand as the machines beeped slower and slower. Miguel Torres had been a carpenter, 47 years old, hands rough as sandpaper, a laugh that could fill any room. He'd immigrated from Mexico at 19, learned English from television and library books, built a life from nothing but determination and sweat. He'd worked 60-hour weeks so his daughter could go to college, so she could have the opportunities he never did. The cancer came fast, pancreatic. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 3. "Mija," he'd whispered to her in those final days, his voice barely audible above the hospital machinery. "Promise me you'll do something beautiful with your life, something that makes you proud." She'd promised. Of course she'd promised. What else could she do? But promises, Jennifer had learned, were easier to make than to keep. Her mother had fallen apart after Miguel's death, depression, then anxiety, then a string of bad decisions that left them drowning in debt. Jennifer had worked 2 jobs through college, graduated with honors despite everything, and then nothing. The art world didn't want her, the museums weren't hiring, the galleries wanted people with connections, with family names, with trust funds to supplement their unpaid internships. So she'd taken the job at Le Petit Chateau. Just for a few months, she'd told herself, just until something better came along. That was 1,461 days ago. She'd counted. "Jennifer, table 7 needs attention." She looked up to see Michel, the head waiter, gesturing toward the front of the restaurant. 2 men had just been seated, one in his late 50s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, the other younger, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and the kind of jawline that belonged in a magazine. The younger man was handsome, devastatingly so. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark brown, almost black, and filled with something she recognized immediately: exhaustion, the kind that sleep couldn't fix. "Coming," she said, smoothing down her apron and grabbing her notepad. As she approached the table, she caught fragments of their conversation. They were speaking in French, rapid, fluent, with the kind of accents that suggested they'd learned it somewhere expensive. "Worth at least $3 million, the older man was saying, sliding something across the table. "A 1954 Rolex Submariner. Original band, original face. The provenance is impeccable." Jennifer's heart stuttered. She'd spent 3 years working at her uncle's antique shop in high school, learning to spot the difference between authentic and counterfeit. Her uncle Marco had been a watchmaker in Mexico City before immigrating, and he'd taught her everything. The weight of real gold, the movement of Swiss mechanisms, the tiny details that separated a masterpiece from a fake. "May I take your order, gentlemen?" she asked in English, keeping her expression neutral. The older man barely glanced at her. "A bottle of the 2009 Chateau Margaux, and give us a moment." But the younger man looked up, and for a second, just a second, their eyes met. Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition of something he couldn't quite name. "Of course," Jennifer said. "Take your time." She walked to the bar, her mind racing. The watch the older man had shown. She'd only caught a glimpse, but something was wrong. The crown was too large. The bezel didn't have the right texture, and the way the man was pushing the sale, the urgency in his voice. It was a scam. She was almost certain of it. The younger man, she didn't know who he was, but his suit was Brioni, his watch, ironically, a genuine Patek Philippe, and his shoes were custom Italian leather. He was rich, very rich, the kind of rich that attracted predators. She should stay out of it. It wasn't her business. She was just a waitress, just a girl with student loans and a dead father's dreams she couldn't seem to fulfill. But then she remembered something her father used to say: "The measure of a person isn't what they do when someone's watching. It's what they do when no one is." Jennifer grabbed the wine bottle and walked back to the table. "Your Chateau Margaux, gentlemen," she said, setting it down. Then, as if making casual conversation, she switched to French. Her accent was flawless, Parisian, refined, the product of countless hours practicing with her professor at NYU. "Excusez-moi." But I couldn't help noticing the timepiece. My grandfather collected watches. "That Submariner you're showing?" She paused, meeting the older man's eyes. "C'est faux, the crown is 3 millimeters too wide, and the luminous markers use modern tritium instead of radium. A genuine 1954 wouldn't pass a basic authentication test." The table went silent. The older man's face shifted from confusion to anger, to something like fear, all in the span of 3 seconds. He snatched the watch back, muttered something about a misunderstanding, and was out the door before the younger man could say a word. And then they were alone. "How did you know?" the younger man asked, his French matching hers in fluency. His voice was deep, measured, the voice of someone used to being in control. But there was something else underneath, genuine surprise, maybe even admiration. "I know watches," Jennifer said simply, "and I know scams. That man's been running variations of that con for years. Different cities, different marks. He preys on wealthy collectors who are too proud to admit they can't spot a fake." The man stared at her for a long moment. Up close, he was even more striking. High cheekbones, a hint of stubble along his jaw, and those tired, beautiful eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Do you know how much I was about to pay for that watch?" Based on what he was claiming, somewhere between $2 and $4 million. 3.7, he confirmed. $3.7 million, and you just saved me from the most embarrassing mistake of my financial career. He leaned back in his chair, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "I'm Dominic Ashford." The name hit her like a wave. Dominic Ashford. The Dominic Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries, a tech and real estate conglomerate valued at $12, $4 billion. His face had been on the cover of Forbes twice in the last 3 years. His company had developed the software that powered half the smart homes in America. He was, by any measure, one of the most powerful men in New York, and she'd just called out a con artist in front of him like it was nothing. "Jennifer," she heard herself say. "Jennifer Torres. I'm your waitress, apparently." "Apparently," he repeated, and this time the smile reached his eyes, just barely, just enough to transform his face from intimidating to something almost warm. "Tell me, Jennifer Torres, do you always save billionaires from million-dollar frauds, or am I special?" "You're my first," she admitted, "though the night is young." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him like he hadn't expected it. The sound did something strange to her chest, a flutter she immediately tried to suppress. She wasn't the kind of woman who got flustered around men, no matter how rich or handsome. She'd learned long ago that charm was often just manipulation in a nicer package. But there was something different about Dominic Ashford, something in the way he looked at her, not through her, the way most wealthy customers did, but at her, like she was a person, not just a function. "Sit with me," he said suddenly. "I'm working." Then take a break. He glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. I don't think anyone will mind. She should have said no. Every instinct she had screamed that this was a bad idea, that men like Dominic Ashford didn't invite waitresses to sit with them out of the goodness of their hearts. There was always an angle, always a catch. But her father's voice echoed in her mind again, softer this time. Sometimes, Mija, you have to take a chance. Otherwise, what's the point of living? 5 minutes, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Then I have to get back. 5 minutes, he agreed. So tell me, and I'm genuinely curious, how does someone who speaks French like a native, who knows more about vintage watches than most collectors, end up serving wine at a restaurant in Manhattan? The question landed harder than she'd expected. Not because it was rude, it wasn't, but because it was honest. As the kind of honest that cut through all her carefully constructed defenses. Life, she said finally. Life happens. You make plans, and then... She trailed off, suddenly unable to find the words. And then they fall apart, Dominic finished quietly. Yeah, I know something about that. There it was again, that exhaustion in his eyes deeper than before, the look of a man carrying something heavy that he couldn't put down. Your turn, Jennifer said. How does a tech billionaire end up almost falling for a watch scam in a restaurant on a Wednesday night? I'm not usually this careless. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that seemed almost boyish on someone so polished. But I've been distracted lately, not sleeping well, making mistakes I wouldn't normally make. Anything you want to talk about? The words were out before she could stop them. It was the kind of thing she said to customers all the time. Casual, meaningless, the verbal equivalent of a polite smile. But something in Dominic's expression shifted, like she'd accidentally touched a wound he'd been hiding. No, he said. Then, softer, maybe. I don't know. They sat in silence for a moment, the restaurant quiet around them except for the soft clink of glasses and the murmur of distant conversation. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement like scattered jewels. I should get back to work, Jennifer said finally, though she didn't move. You should, Dominic agreed. He didn't move either. This was unexpected. It was. His eyes held hers, and she felt something pass between them, a current, invisible but undeniable. Jennifer Torres, I have a feeling this isn't the last time we'll see each other. Is that a threat or a promise? Which would you prefer? She stood up, smoothing her apron, trying to regain some semblance of professionalism. I don't know yet. Ask me again sometime. She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape. When she finally glanced back, he was watching her, not in a predatory way, but with something that looked almost like wonder, like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. At 11:23 p.m., after the restaurant had closed and she'd finished her side work, Jennifer found an envelope tucked under the salt shaker at table 7. Inside was a crisp $100 bill and a business card with nothing but a phone number written on the back. No name, no title, just 10 digits and 2 words. Thank you. She stood there for a long time, the card pressed between her fingers, wondering what her father would say if he could see her now. Wondering if maybe, just maybe, the universe was finally giving her a chance. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now let's see what happens next. 3 days passed before Jennifer Torres allowed herself to look at the business card again. She'd hidden it in her nightstand drawer, tucked between a dog-eared copy of Madame Bovary and a photograph of her father from his 40th birthday, the last one before the diagnosis. Every night she'd open the drawer, see the card's edge peeking out, and close it again without touching it. It was safer that way. Simpler. At 5:17 a.m. on Saturday morning, her alarm shattered the silence of her tiny apartment. She lay in bed for exactly 90 seconds. She'd timed it once just to see, before forcing herself upright. The walls of her studio were still dark, the winter sun hours away from rising, And outside her single window, Brooklyn was grey and quiet. Her morning routine was precision itself. Shower, 7 minutes. Hair and minimal makeup, 12 minutes. Coffee, made the night before, reheated in a chipped mug that had belonged to her father. Breakfast, Greek yogurt with exactly 1 tablespoon of honey, because anything more would throw off her $347 per month grocery budget. By 6:45, she was on the subway, squeezed between a man reading a newspaper and a woman with 3 shopping bags who took up 2 seats. The commute to Le Petit Chateau took 43 minutes door to door. She'd calculated it hundreds of times, knew every stop by heart, could predict the delays with almost supernatural accuracy. This was her life, predictable, controlled, safe, which was why Dominic Ashford terrified her. Not because of who he was, though a man worth $12, $4 billion certainly warranted some caution, but because of what he'd stirred in her, that flutter in her chest, that moment when their eyes met, and she'd felt for just a second like someone had seen her, really seen her. She couldn't afford that kind of complication. Her mother had taught her that lesson the hard way. After Miguel's death, Elena Torres had fallen for a series of men who promised salvation and delivered only destruction. First, there was Carlos, who drained their savings with a business opportunity that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Then Ricardo, whose charm masked a gambling addiction that cost them the house. And finally David, who left after 18 months with Elena's credit cards maxed out and her heart in pieces. Jennifer had watched her mother break apart and put herself back together so many times that she'd learned to build her own walls thick and high. No man was worth the risk. No flutter in her chest was worth the inevitable fall. So why couldn't she stop thinking about him? "You're distracted," Michel observed during her shift that evening, his French accent making the accusation sound almost elegant. "3 times you've brought water to tables that didn't ask for it." "Sorry," Jennifer mumbled. "I didn't sleep well." Michael's eyes narrowed with the kind of perception that came from 30 years in the restaurant business. "This wouldn't have anything to do with the gentleman from Wednesday, would it? The one who left a $100 tip and watched you like you were the only person in the room?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." He patted her shoulder with something approaching sympathy. "Just be careful, Cherie. Men like that, they live in a different world. And girls like us, we don't belong there." Girls like us. The words echoed in her mind as she worked through the dinner rush, taking orders and pouring wine and smiling at customers who looked through her like she was furniture. Girls like us, like she was a category, a type, a predictable outcome waiting to happen. Maybe Michel was right. Maybe the smart thing, the safe thing, was to throw away the business card and forget Dominic Ashford ever existed. At 9:47 p.m. the door opened and he walked in. He wasn't dressed like before. Instead of the Brioni suit, he wore dark jeans and a grey sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was slightly disheveled, and the exhaustion she'd noticed before had deepened, settling into the hollows of his cheeks like shadows. He looked, Jennifer thought, like a man running from something he couldn't escape. "Table for 1, he told the hostess, though his eyes found Jennifer across the room immediately. "Somewhere quiet, if you have it." They seated him at table 12, which was her section. Of course it was. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. "You didn't call," he said when she approached. No preamble, no small talk. "I left my number." "I know. Most people would have called." "I'm not most people." She pulled out her notepad, all business. "What can I get you tonight?" For a moment she thought he might push, might demand an explanation, or make some grand gesture that would force her hand. But instead, he just smiled, a small, tired thing that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What do you recommend?" She blinked. "Excuse me. I've eaten at restaurants all over the world. Michelin stars, famous chefs, meals that cost more than most people make in a month. And you know what I've learned?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "The best food isn't always on the menu. It's what the people who work there actually eat, so what do you recommend?" No one had ever asked her that before. Not in 4 years of working here, 4 years of serving food she couldn't afford to eat herself. "The duck confit," she said slowly, "but ask Jean-Pierre to add the fig reduction from the special last month. It's not on the menu anymore, but he'll do it if you ask nicely. And the roasted vegetables on the side, not the potatoes. They use too much butter in the potatoes. Done. He closed the menu he hadn't even opened. And whatever you're having for dinner. I hate eating alone. Mr. Ashford, Dominic, please. Dominic. The name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate. I'm working. So take a break. I already know you're allowed. You took one Wednesday. That was different. How? She didn't have an answer. Not one she could say out loud, anyway. How could she explain that Wednesday had been a moment of madness, a crack in her carefully constructed walls, that she'd spent the last 3 days trying to patch that crack before it spread? I'm not someone who takes breaks, she said finally. I'm someone who works. So am I. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or regret. That's actually part of the problem. There was a story there. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, hear it in the weight of his words. A story that had nothing to do with billion-dollar companies or magazine covers, and everything to do with whatever haunted those beautiful, exhausted eyes. Fine, she heard herself say. Let me put in your order, but I'm only taking 15 minutes. 15 minutes is all I need. She didn't believe that for a second, but she put in the order anyway, grabbed a bread basket from the kitchen, and found herself sliding into the chair across from him for the second time in a week. So, she said, tearing off a piece of baguette with more force than necessary. What brings a billionaire back to the same restaurant 3 days later? And don't tell me it's the duck. It's not the duck. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the white tablecloth. I couldn't stop thinking about something you said. Life happens. You make plans, and then they fall apart. I've been replaying it in my head like a broken record. That's not exactly profound wisdom. No, he agreed, but it's true. And sometimes truth is more valuable than profundity. She watched him carefully, trying to read the subtext beneath his words. Men like Dominic Ashford didn't make casual conversation. Every word, every gesture was calculated for maximum effect. At least, that's what she'd always assumed about people in his world. But nothing about him felt calculated tonight. He seemed raw, exposed, like he'd taken off whatever armor he usually wore and come to her defenseless. Your turn, she said. Tell me something true. Something true. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Okay. Something true. 2 years and 4 months ago, I was engaged to a woman named Victoria Sterling. We'd been together for 5 years. I thought she was the love of my life. Jennifer felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't expected him to actually answer. What happened? She took half of everything I had. His voice was flat, detached, like he was reciting a news report about someone else's life. Not in the divorce. We never made it that far. She was smarter than that. Turns out she'd been planning it for years. Shell companies, offshore accounts, manipulated contracts. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd transferred $840 million out of my accounts and disappeared to a country with no extradition treaty. $840 million. Jennifer couldn't even conceive of that number. Her entire net worth, if you could call $2,237 in savings and $34,000 in debt a net worth, wouldn't cover the interest on a sum like that. The worst part, Dominic continued, wasn't the money. Money can be remade, companies can recover. The worst part was realizing that everything I thought I knew about her, 5 years of memories, 5 years of conversations, 5 years of falling asleep next to someone, all of it was a performance. She never loved me. She loved what I could give her. How did you find out? I came home early from a business trip. Caught her on a call with her actual partner, the man she'd been working with the whole time. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just smiled and said, I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out. He shook his head slowly. I haven't been able to trust anyone since, not really. Every interaction, every relationship, I find myself waiting for the betrayal, looking for the angle, assuming the worst. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. She understood that feeling better than he knew, the way betrayal could rewire your brain, make you see threats in every kindness, traps in every open door. Is that why you almost fell for the watch scam? she asked softly. Probably. I've been so focused on protecting myself from the big betrayals that I stopped paying attention to the small ones. He met her eyes, and she saw something vulnerable beneath the exhaustion, something almost like hope. But then you showed up, a stranger with nothing to gain who saved me anyway. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? I had something to gain, Jennifer admitted. $100 tip. You didn't know I'd leave that when you helped me. No, she conceded. I didn't. So why did you do it? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Why had she done it? Why had she risked her job, her anonymity, her carefully maintained distance from the world of the wealthy and powerful? My father, she said finally. He used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when someone's watching. It's what they do when no one is. She paused, surprised by the emotion rising in her throat. He died 8 years ago, cancer. But I still hear his voice sometimes, telling me to do the right thing even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense. He sounds like a good man. He was the best man I ever knew. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. Sorry. I don't talk about him with anyone. Then I'm honored you told me. And the way he said it, simple, sincere, without any trace of the polished charm she'd expected, made her believe him. The duck arrived, breaking the moment. Jean-Pierre himself brought it out, clearly curious about the man who'd requested his off-menu fig reduction. Jennifer took the opportunity to compose herself, to rebuild the walls that had somehow crumbled during their conversation. I should get back to work, she said, standing. Your 15 minutes are up. Stay. It wasn't a command, more like a request, almost a plea. Please, I know I have no right to ask, but I haven't talked to anyone like this in months, maybe years, and I'm not ready for it to end. Dominic. I'm not trying to buy you, he said quickly. I'm not trying to impress you with my money or my company or any of that. He trailed off, searching for words. I just want to sit across from someone who sees me as a person, not a transaction. Is that too much to ask? It was such a simple request, such a human request, and yet Jennifer knew that if she said yes, if she stayed, she would be taking a step down a path she might not be able to return from. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes, Mika, you have to take a chance. Okay, she said softly, sliding back into her chair. But you're sharing that duck. I'm starving, and the staff meal tonight was terrible. For the first time since she'd met him, Dominic Ashford smiled. A real smile, one that transformed his entire face from handsome to radiant. Deal, he said, but only if you tell me more about those watches. I clearly need an education. And so they talked. About watches and art and the streets of Paris, about dreams that died and dreams that refused to, about fathers who left too soon and lovers who betrayed, about all the small, invisible wounds that shaped who they were. Outside, the city glittered and pulsed with its endless energy, millions of strangers passing in the night. But inside Le Petit Chateau, two people who never should have met sat across from each other, sharing secrets they'd never told anyone else. And somewhere in the space between them, something began to grow. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling. Dominic came to Le Petit Chateau every night Jennifer worked, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. He'd sit at table 12, order whatever she recommended, and wait for her breaks with a patience that seemed entirely at odds with his reputation as a ruthless businessman. The man who built a $12 billion empire, she teased him one Thursday evening, 3 weeks into whatever this was. And he's spending his evenings waiting for a waitress to take her 15-minute breaks. 20 minutes, he corrected. Michel gave you 20 tonight, I heard him. You're keeping track? I'm a numbers person, but there was no calculation in his smile, just warmth, and something that looked dangerously close to affection. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Connecticut, the only child of a demanding father who measured love in achievements and a mother who died when he was 12. He told her about building his first company at 23, about the sleepless nights and the sacrifices that turned a garage startup into a global empire. He told her about the loneliness that came with success, the way people stopped seeing you as human once you had enough zeros in your bank account. And she told him things she'd never told anyone. About her father's final days, how she'd held his hand as his breathing slowed and felt something fundamental break inside her. About her mother's spiral into bad relationships, how Jennifer had spent her teenage years being the parent, cleaning up messes that weren't hers to clean. About the dreams she'd buried so deep, she sometimes forgot she'd ever had them. "You wanted to be a curator," Dominic said one night, leaning forward with genuine interest. "At a museum." "The Met," she admitted. "I used to walk through those galleries and imagine my name on the little plaques. Exhibition curated by Jennifer Torres. Stupid, right?" "Not stupid. Dreams are never stupid." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, just for a moment, just long enough to send electricity sparking up her arm. "Why did you give up?" "I didn't give up, I just postponed." "For 4 years." She pulled her hand back, suddenly defensive. "Not everyone has the luxury of pursuing their dreams, Dominic. Some of us have student loans and rent and mothers who need help making ends meet." "I know." His voice was gentle, without judgment. "I'm not criticizing. I'm trying to understand." "What's there to understand?" "Life happened. My father died, my mother fell apart, and I did what I had to do to survive. That's it. That's the whole story." But it wasn't the whole story, and they both knew it. The whole story included the rejection letters she kept in a shoebox under her bed, 47 of them, from museums and galleries across the country. The whole story included the interview at the Whitney 3 years ago, where she'd been asked if she had any connections in the art world, and watched the interest drain from the interviewer's eyes when she said no. The whole story included all the small daily humiliations of being talented but unconnected in a world where who you knew mattered more than what you knew. "Can I show you something?" Dominic asked suddenly. "That depends. Is it appropriate for a restaurant?" He laughed, that surprised laugh she was learning to love, the one that seemed to escape him against his will. "It's a photograph, on my phone. Completely appropriate, I promise." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a picture, a small oil painting, maybe 12 inches square, of a woman sitting by a window with light streaming across her face. "Do you recognize it?" Jennifer studied the image, her trained eye taking in the brushwork, the color palette, the composition. "It looks like early Impressionism. The light reminds me of Morisot, but the brushstrokes are too bold. Maybe a lesser-known artist from the same period." "Close. It's actually by a student of Morisot's, a woman named Claire Duval who never achieved much recognition during her lifetime. I bought it at an auction 3 years ago for $47,000. It's beautiful. It's my favorite piece in my entire collection." He put the phone away, his eyes never leaving her face. "And I bought it because of a paper written by a graduate student at NYU, a paper about forgotten female artists of the Impressionist movement and the ways their work has been systematically undervalued." Jennifer's heart stopped. The author argued that Claire Duval's use of natural light was revolutionary for her time, and that her obscurity had more to do with gender politics than artistic merit. He smiled. "I tracked down that paper through an art dealer friend. It was extremely well written, changed the way I thought about collecting entirely. You read my thesis. The words came out barely above a whisper. I told you I was a numbers person, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate art. I've been collecting for 15 years, Jennifer, and in all that time, no one has ever made me think about a painting the way you did in 20 pages. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the fact that this man, this billionaire who could have anything, know anyone, had somehow found her forgotten academic work and been moved by it. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally managed. "Because I wanted you to know me first, as a person, not as a potential patron. I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy you, or worse, that I was dangling opportunities to manipulate you into something." "Are you? Dangling opportunities?" "That depends." He met her eyes, and she saw the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection, the hope of acceptance. "Would you want them if I were?" It was a dangerous question, the kind of question that could change everything. "I don't know," Jennifer admitted. "I've worked so hard to build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else, to be safe, to be self-sufficient. And then you walk in with your Brioni suits and your Forbes covers and your $47,000 paintings, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about what I wanted doesn't make sense anymore. Something like that. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone? She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After Victoria, after what she did, I swore I'd never let anyone get close again. I built walls, hired people to investigate anyone who got within 10 feet of my personal life. Became so paranoid about betrayal that I pushed away everyone who might actually have cared about me. He paused, swallowing hard. My best friend from college, the godfather of my future children if I ever have any, I accused him of leaking information to the press. Turns out it was a junior analyst at my company, someone I'd never even met. By the time I found out the truth, Jake had moved to Seattle. He still won't return my calls. Dominic, I'm telling you this because I want you to understand. What I feel for you terrifies me. Every instinct I have screams that it's too soon, too fast, too dangerous, that you must want something, that no one could actually be as genuine as you seem to be. And yet you keep coming back. And yet I keep coming back. He reached across the table again, and this time she didn't pull away when his fingers found hers. Because when I'm with you, something quiets in my head. Something, the constant analysis, the paranoia, the waiting for the other shoe to drop. And Jennifer thought, maybe this is what my father meant. Maybe this is something beautiful. Maybe this is worth the risk. 2 months into their relationship, Jennifer found herself standing in Dominic's penthouse apartment for the first time. It was everything she'd expected, and nothing like it at all. The view of Central Park was breathtaking. 63 floors up, the city spread out below like a glittering map. The furniture was expensive, clearly chosen by a designer rather than a person. All clean lines and neutral colors, and not a single comfortable blanket in sight. But what caught her attention were the walls. They were covered in art. Not just any art. The kind of carefully curated collection that spoke of years of thoughtful acquisition. Impressionist pieces alongside contemporary works, each one positioned to catch the light in a specific way. And there, above the fireplace, was the Claire Duval painting she'd written about in her thesis. "You weren't lying," she said softly, walking toward it, "about that painting being your favorite. I never lie." Dominic came up behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "It reminds me of what matters, the things that are overlooked because the world doesn't know how to see them. Is that how you see me? Overlooked? I see you as the most extraordinary person I've ever met." He turned her gently to face him, "And I'm tired of hiding that. I'm tired of sneaking around and pretending that what we have is casual." Jennifer's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my company is hosting a gala next month, the Ashford Foundation's annual charity event. Every important person in New York will be there. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities." He took her hands in his. "I want you to come, as my date, as my partner." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Dominic, I don't have anything to wear to something like that. I don't know how to—" "I'll help you. Not by buying you things," he added quickly, seeing her expression, "but by being there with you every step of the way. I don't care what anyone thinks, I only care what you think." She should have said no. She knew that. A waitress from Brooklyn, walking into a room full of billionaires and socialites, it was asking for humiliation. Asking for the kind of comparison she'd spent her whole life trying to avoid. But when she looked into Dominic's eyes, those beautiful, exhausted eyes that had seen her from the very first moment, she couldn't find the word. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay. On one condition." She squeezed his hands. "You let me choose my own dress. I may not have much money, but I have taste." He laughed, pulling her into his arms. "That's one of the many things I love about you." The word slipped out casually, naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Love. He loved her. Or at least, one of the many things he loved. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. "Did you just—" "Yes." He pulled back to look at her, his expression serious now. "I know it's soon. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel. Jennifer Torres, I am completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love with you." She should have been scared, should have felt the walls shooting back up, the defenses snapping into place. But standing there in his arms, with the city lights twinkling below and Claire Duval watching from above the fireplace, all she felt was peace. "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me, I love you too." The kiss that followed was different from the ones that came before, deeper, more urgent, flavored with the knowledge of what they'd just admitted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic pressed his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he said. "Please. I just want to fall asleep with you next to me, nothing more, just that." She stayed. And for the first time in over 2 years, Dominic Ashford slept through the night without a single nightmare. The gala was 3 weeks away, and Jennifer threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she'd once applied to her thesis. She visited 7 vintage shops before finding the perfect dress, a deep emerald green that hugged her curves and made her eyes seem to glow. It cost $127, marked down from $450, and when she tried it on, she felt like someone else entirely. Someone who belonged in ballrooms. Someone who could stand next to a billionaire and not feel small. She practiced walking in heels until her feet ached. She watched videos on formal etiquette, memorized the names of Dominic's board members and major investors, and even researched the charity they'd be supporting, a foundation that provided art education to underprivileged children. "You don't have to do all this," Dominic said one evening, watching her study a list of corporate names on her laptop. "No one's going to quiz you." "I know, but I want to be prepared. I want to fit in." "You don't need to fit in." He closed her laptop gently. "You need to be yourself. That's more than enough." "Easy for you to say. You grew up in this world." "I grew up feeling like I never quite belonged in this world," he corrected quietly. "Too focused on ideas to play the social games everyone else seemed to understand instinctively. It took me years to learn how to fake it, to build the armor that let me survive board meetings and charity galas and all the rest of it." He cupped her face in his hands. "But with you I don't have to wear that armor. And I don't want you to build your own. I want to show them the real you, the woman I fell in love with." Jennifer leaned into his touch, some of the tension draining from her shoulders. "What if they don't like the real me? Then they don't deserve to know you." The night of the gala arrived faster than Jennifer expected. She'd spent 3 hours getting ready, hair swept up in an elegant twist, makeup subtle but polished, the emerald dress fitting like it had been made for her. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not because she'd changed, but because she was finally letting herself shine. Dominic's reaction when she opened her door made every minute of preparation worth it. "Jennifer," his voice was barely a whisper, "you look. I know." She smiled, feeling a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Not bad for a waitress, right? Not bad for a queen. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was everything Jennifer had imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and canapes that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. And everyone was looking at her. She felt Dominic's hand tighten on the small of her back, steadying her. "They're curious," he murmured in her ear. "I haven't brought anyone to one of these events since Victoria. Let them look. Let them wonder. All they need to know is that you're with me. What if I say the wrong thing? Then I'll say something worse, and they'll be too distracted to notice." He grinned. "Trust me. I've been embarrassing myself at these things for a decade." The evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Jennifer met senators and CEOs, actors and philanthropists, people whose names she'd only read in magazines. Most of them were polite, if distant. A few were genuinely warm. And some, like the silver-haired woman who approached them near the silent auction, were openly hostile. "Dominic, darling." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I was beginning to think you'd never show your face in public again. The rumors were getting so colorful." "Mrs. Harrington," Dominic's voice was ice. "Allow me to introduce Jennifer Torres. Jennifer, this is Margaret Harrington. She sits on several of the same boards I do. Among other things, Matze." Harrington's gaze traveled over Jennifer with undisguised contempt. "How charming. And what is it you do, dear?" "I'm a waitress," Jennifer said evenly, "at Le Petit Chateau. A waitress." The word dripped with disdain. "How? Entrepreneurial of you." "Actually, Mrs. Harrington," Dominic cut in, his arm wrapping protectively around Jennifer's waist. "Jennifer has a degree in art history from NYU. She speaks 3 languages fluently and has published academic work that directly influenced my collection." His smile was sharp as a blade. "What was your degree in again?" "Oh, that's right, you didn't finish one." Mrs. Harrington's face went pale, then red. She muttered something about needing to speak to someone else and disappeared into the crowd. "That was unnecessary," Jennifer said quietly. "It was absolutely necessary. No one speaks to you like that." Dominic turned to face her fully, his expression fierce. "I know you can fight your own battles, but you don't have to, not anymore." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence, her self-sufficiency, all the things she'd built her identity around. But something in his eyes stopped her, a protective fury that wasn't about control or possession. It was simply love, the kind of love that couldn't stand to see her diminished. "Thank you," she said softly. "Always." The rest of the evening passed more pleasantly. Jennifer found herself relaxing, even enjoying the absurdity of her situation. A waitress who made $2,340 a month after taxes, standing in a room where the paintings on the walls were worth more than she'd make in a lifetime, but none of that mattered. Not really. Because every time she glanced at Dominic, he was looking at her like she was the most important thing in the room. Around midnight, after the speeches and the awards and the ceremonial oversized checks, they escaped to a balcony overlooking Fifth Avenue. The city sprawled below them, alive with light and sound and possibility. "You survived," Dominic said, handing her a glass of champagne. "Barely." She laughed, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. "My feet are going to hate me tomorrow." "Mine too. These shoes are Italian leather, and they're absolutely terrible." "Then why do you wear them?" "Because I'm supposed to." He leaned against the railing beside her. "Because somewhere along the way I convinced myself that comfort was less important than appearance. That being taken seriously meant being uncomfortable. That's a terrible way to live." "I know." He turned to look at her, his face softened by the city lights. "You're teaching me better." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the traffic move far below. Jennifer found herself thinking about how surreal this was, standing on a balcony at the plaza, champagne in hand, with a man who loved her. A man who'd seen through her defenses and chosen her anyway. "Can I ask you something?" Dominic said suddenly. "Anything. If you could do anything, anything at all, money, no object, no practical limitations, what would you do?" She didn't have to think about it. "I'd open a gallery, a small one, somewhere in Brooklyn, or maybe the Lower East Side. I'd showcase artists like Claire Duval, people who were overlooked because of who they were, not how talented they were. I'd give them a second chance to be seen." "That's beautiful. It's a fantasy." She shrugged. "In real life, I'll be lucky to pay off my student loans before I'm 40. What if it didn't have to be a fantasy?" Jennifer stiffened. "Dominic, I'm not offering you money," he said quickly. "I know you wouldn't take it. But what if I could connect you with people? Investors who care about art, about giving opportunities to emerging curators. What if I could open doors without pushing you through them? Why would you do that?" "Because you deserve it." His voice was low, intense. "Because you've spent your whole life sacrificing for everyone else, and I want to give you something that's just for you. Not because I expect anything in return, but because..." He struggled for words. "Because loving someone means wanting to see them thrive. And watching you hide your brilliance behind a waitress's apron when you could be changing the art world. It breaks my heart." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of something more complicated. Joy, maybe, or hope, or the terrifying sensation of being truly seen. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll let me help. Say you'll let yourself want something for once, instead of always surviving." She looked at him, this broken, brilliant man who'd been shattered by betrayal and somehow managed to trust again, who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway, who was offering her not a handout but a hand up. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He kissed her then, there on the balcony with the city spread out below them like a promise. And Jennifer thought, this is real. This is happening. My life is actually changing. She didn't know yet that change could cut both ways, that the same light that illuminated could also reveal. That somewhere in the shadows of Dominic's past, something was stirring, something that would threaten everything they'd built. But for now, in that perfect moment, she let herself believe in the fairy tale. For now, she was happy. And that was enough. It was 3 weeks after the gala when Jennifer's world cracked open. She was at work, folding napkins into swans, a mindless task she'd performed thousands of times, when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Normally, she ignored them, but something made her look. Billionaire Dominic Ashford's new romance. Who is the mystery waitress? Her blood ran cold. The article was accompanied by a photo from the gala, Jennifer and Dominic on the balcony, his hand on her cheek, their silhouettes unmistakable against the city lights. Someone had been watching. Someone with a camera. She scrolled down, her hands trembling. Sources close to the couple reveal that Jennifer Torres, 26, has been seeing Ashford since early December. Torres works as a waitress at Le Petit Chateau, a French restaurant in Manhattan where the two allegedly met. Unlike Ashford's previous partner Victoria Sterling, who was heir to the Sterling shipping fortune, Torres comes from humble origins. Her father, Miguel Torres, was a carpenter who passed away 8 years ago, and her mother, Elena, reportedly struggles with financial difficulties. They knew about her father, about her mother, about everything. Jennifer felt sick. How much had they dug up? How much of her life was now public property? She was still staring at her phone when Michel appeared beside her. "There's a phone call for you," he said quietly. "In the back office. It sounds important." The voice on the other end wasn't Dominic's. "Miss Torres." The woman's tone was ice-cold, clipped, with an accent Jennifer couldn't quite place. "My name is Catherine Vale. I'm Mr. Ashford's personal attorney." "I don't understand. Is something wrong? Is Dominic—" "Mr. Ashford is fine, but there's a matter we need to discuss, in person. Can you come to his office this afternoon? 2 o'clock. I'll send a car. I'm working until— 2 o'clock, Miss Torres. I'm sure your employer will understand." The line went dead. Jennifer stared at the phone for a long moment, something cold settling in her stomach. Dominic's attorney, not Dominic himself. What could be so important, or so wrong, that it required lawyers instead of conversation? Michel gave her the afternoon off without question. He'd seen the news alert too. The car that arrived was black, sleek, driven by a man in a suit who didn't speak a single word during the 23-minute ride to Ashford Industries headquarters. Jennifer spent the entire trip staring out the window, watching the city blur past, trying to convince herself that everything was fine. It wasn't fine. She could feel it in her bones. The office was on the 58th floor of a glass tower that bore Dominic's name in silver letters. Jennifer had never been here before. They'd kept their relationship separate from his work, or so she'd thought. Now, walking through the pristine lobby with its abstract art and minimal furniture, she felt like an intruder, like someone who didn't belong. Catherine Vale met her at the elevator. She was exactly what Jennifer had imagined. Late 40s, impeccably dressed in a grey suit that probably cost more than Jennifer made in a month, with steel grey hair and eyes to match. "Miss Torres, thank you for coming." No warmth, no pleasantries, just business. "Mr. Ashford is waiting. Please follow me." She led Jennifer down a long corridor lined with closed doors, finally stopping before one marked private. She knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Dominic was standing by the window, his back to them. He didn't turn around. "That will be all, Catherine," he said quietly. The attorney left, closing the door behind her. Jennifer and Dominic were alone, but the space between them felt vast, wider than the entire room. "You've seen the article," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "I'm sorry. I should have warned you this might happen." "I should have." He finally turned, and Jennifer caught her breath. He looked destroyed, eyes red-rimmed, jaw tight. The exhaustion she'd grown used to seeing transformed into something raw. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." Her heart dropped. "Dominic, what?" "After Victoria, I hired people, private investigators, to screen anyone who got close to me, to make sure I'd never be blindsided again." He paused, struggling with the words. "When we met, that first night at the restaurant, I thought it was coincidence, fate, maybe. But it wasn't." Jennifer felt the floor shift beneath her. "What are you saying?" "I'd already seen your picture, in a report. 3 months before we ever met," his voice cracked. "My investigators flagged you as someone who'd written about art, who worked near my usual dinner spots, who might be useful to know. I came to that restaurant that night because I knew you'd be there." The words landed like blows, each one harder than the last. "You planned this?" Jennifer heard herself say. Everything, the watch, the conversations, all of it, was some kind of set-up? "No, God, no." Dominic moved toward her, then stopped when she stepped back. "The connection was real. Everything I felt, everything I feel, is real. But the beginning. I can't lie to you anymore. I engineered the beginning. Jennifer's mind reeled. All those nights at the restaurant, all those conversations that felt so natural, so spontaneous, had any of it been genuine? Or had she been just another target, another piece on his chessboard? Why, she demanded. Why would you do that? Why would you manipulate someone into... I was terrified. The admission tore out of him. After Victoria, I couldn't trust anyone, so I tried to control everything, to know everything about everyone before they could get close. I thought if I understood who you were, if I vetted you first, I could protect myself. By lying to me? By being careful, or so I told myself. He ran his hands through his hair, the gesture desperate. But then I actually met you, and you were nothing like the file. You were real. You were funny and smart, and you called me out on my bullshit, and you didn't care about my money, and I fell in love with you. Really, truly fell in love with you. And by then it was too late to tell you the truth. So you just kept lying. I kept hoping it wouldn't matter, that the beginning could be erased by everything that came after. His eyes met hers, wet with tears he wasn't trying to hide. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Jennifer stood frozen, her entire body numb. She thought about all the moments that had felt so magical. The kiss at the museum, the balcony at the gala, the night she'd told him about her father. Had any of it been real? Or had she been performing for an audience she didn't even know existed? The article, she said slowly. Did you leak it? What? No, God, no. That was Victoria. Victoria. She's been watching, waiting for me to be happy again so she could destroy it. His jaw tightened with fury. She fed the story to the press, including the background information about your family. She must have found my investigators' files. She's trying to humiliate you, to hurt me through you. And how do I know that's true? Jennifer heard her voice rising, couldn't stop it. How do I know anything you've told me is true? Because I'm telling you now. Because I'm standing here, admitting everything, even though I know it might make you walk away. He took a step toward her. Jennifer, please, I know I handled this terribly. I know I broke your trust. But I love you. That has never been a lie. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But all she could think about was her mother, falling for man after man who swore they loved her while systematically destroying her life. All she could think about was her father's voice, telling her to do the right thing even when it hurt. I need to go, she said. Jennifer, I need to think. She was backing toward the door now, her vision blurring with tears. I can't process this. Not here. Not with you looking at me like that. Let me explain more. You had months to explain. The words came out sharper than she intended. Months to tell me the truth, and you chose not to. You chose to let me fall in love with a fantasy. It wasn't a fantasy. I'm real. What we have is real. I don't know what's real anymore. She reached for the door handle, her hand shaking. I don't know who you are. I'm not sure I ever did. Jennifer, please don't leave, not like this. She paused, one hand on the door, and looked back at him. He was crying now, openly, without shame, and something in her heart cracked at the sight. This wasn't the polished billionaire from the magazines. This was just a man, broken and scared, and desperately in love. But love without trust was just another kind of prison. I believed you, she said softly. When you told me about Victoria, about the betrayal, I believed you. I thought you understood what it meant to be lied to have someone you love manipulate you. I do understand. That's why. Then how could you do it to me? Her voice broke on the last word. How could you, of all people, do the same thing to me? He had no answer, or if he did, she didn't stay to hear it. She walked out of his office, past Catherine Vale's disapproving stare, through the pristine lobby with its abstract art, and out into the cold winter afternoon. She didn't stop walking until she reached Central Park, where she finally collapsed onto a bench and let herself cry. Everything she'd believed, every moment she'd treasured, was tainted now. Painted over with the knowledge that it had been orchestrated, planned, engineered by a man who claimed to love her, but couldn't trust her enough to be honest. She thought about her father in those final days at the hospital. He'd held her hand and told her to do something beautiful with her life, something that made her proud. Had this been beautiful? Had any of it been worth being proud of? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that she needed to put herself back together, to find her footing in a world that had just shifted beneath her feet, and to figure out if anything at all, could survive this kind of destruction. The next few days passed in a blur of numbness and determination. Jennifer went back to work, because that's what she did. That's who she was, someone who kept going no matter what. Michael asked no questions, just gave her the tables farthest from the window and made sure she never worked alone. The other servers were kind in that awkward way people are kind to someone whose personal life has become public entertainment. She didn't read the articles, didn't watch the news segments, didn't look at the 63 voicemails and 142 text messages from Dominic that accumulated on her phone like a digital avalanche. She just worked, folded napkins, smiled at customers, counted her tips, $97 on Monday, $140 on Tuesday, $88 on Wednesday, and tried to remember what her life had been like before him. It had been smaller, quieter, less terrifying, but also less alive. On Thursday night, 4 days after she'd walked out of his office, Jennifer came home to find someone waiting on her doorstep. Not Dominic. She'd half expected him, had rehearsed a dozen speeches about boundaries and respect and the impossibility of trusting someone who'd already lied to you. Instead, it was a woman, blonde, perfectly styled, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from a lifetime of expensive things. Victoria Sterling. "We need to talk," Victoria said, her smile sharp as a blade. "About Dominic, and about what he's not telling you." Jennifer's blood ran cold. "I have nothing to say to you." "No. Not even about the real reason he was at that restaurant? Not even about the woman whose life he destroyed before you?" Victoria's smile widened. "You think you're the first waitress he's fallen in love with? You think you're special?" Jennifer knew she should walk away, should go inside, lock the door, pretend this conversation never happened. But something in Victoria's words, some kernel of poison wrapped in silk, made her hesitate. "What are you talking about?" "Invite me in, Jennifer. I'll tell you everything. And then you can decide for yourself. Is Dominic Ashford worth destroying your life for?" Jennifer looked at the woman who had stolen $840 million and apparently her peace of mind. The smart thing would be to refuse, to close the door, to protect whatever was left of her heart. But she'd spent her whole life being smart, being careful, being safe, and look where that had gotten her. 5 minutes, she heard herself say, "and then you leave." Victoria's smile turned triumphant. "That's all I need." 5 minutes turned into 30, not because Victoria had that much to say, but because it took Jennifer that long to realize the truth. Victoria was lying. Every accusation, every revelation, every piece of damning evidence, it was all fabricated, twisted versions of reality designed to destroy whatever remained of Jennifer's faith in Dominic. "There was another woman," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "A waitress in Chicago 2 years ago. He did the same thing to her. Investigated her, seduced her, and then threw her away when he got bored." "I don't believe you." "Of course you don't. That's what makes you perfect for him. You're so desperate to believe in the fairy tale that you'll ignore the warning signs." Victoria leaned forward. "But I have proof. Documents, photographs, everything you need to see who he really is." Jennifer looked at the woman sitting in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never been glamorous, but had always been honest. And she saw something she recognized. Fear. Not the fear of being discovered, but the fear of losing control. The fear of someone like Dominic actually finding happiness after what she'd done to him. "You're not here to warn me," Jennifer said slowly. "You're here to destroy him. Through me." "I'm here to—" "No, listen." Jennifer stood up, feeling something shift inside her. Some clarity that had been obscured by hurt and confusion. "You stole $840 million from him. You humiliated him. You took 5 years of his life and used them to build a con. And he survived. He rebuilt. And now he's happy, or he was, before you interfered." Victoria's expression flickered. "He hurt me first. He was cold, distant. So you took half his fortune and fled the country? That's not pain. That's revenge." Jennifer walked to the door and opened it. "Get out." "You're making a mistake." Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She met Victoria's eyes, unflinching. And if you ever come near me again, I'll make sure every journalist in New York knows exactly what you did, including the parts Dominic was too proud to share. Victoria stood, her composure cracking for the first time. You think he loves you? He doesn't know how to love. He's too broken. We're all broken, Jennifer said. The question is whether we let it define us. She closed the door in Victoria's face and stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding. Then she picked up her phone and listened to the voicemails, all 63 of them. Most were short, just Dominic's voice saying her name, asking her to call, telling her he was sorry. But the last one, sent at 3:47 a.m. that morning, was different. Jennifer. His voice was raw, exhausted, stripped of every defense. I don't know if you'll ever listen to this. I don't know if I have any right to ask you to. But I need you to know something. A pause. The sound of a breath being drawn. The night we met, the night you saved me from that fake watch, I almost didn't come. I'd spent 3 months reading files about you, telling myself I was being careful, but really I was just scared. Scared of feeling something real. Scared of being hurt again. Another pause. But then I saw you, and you were standing there with your notepad and your tired eyes, and your complete lack of interest in impressing anyone. And something inside me just stopped. All the fear, all the calculation, it just stopped, and I thought, there she is. There's the person I've been looking for. Jennifer felt tears sliding down her face. I know I lied to you. I know I broke your trust. But everything that happened after that first moment, every conversation, every laugh, every time you looked at me like I was a person and not a target, that was real. That was the most real thing I've ever experienced. His voice cracked. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. Meeting you didn't save my life, but it made it worth living. And whatever happens next, I will never, ever regret a single moment I spent with you. The message ended. Jennifer stood in her tiny apartment, surrounded by silence, and felt something break open inside her. Not her heart, that had already been broken and rebuilt so many times she'd lost count. This was something deeper, something older. The walls she'd built after her father died, the defenses she'd constructed against a world that took everything and gave nothing back. They were crumbling. And for the first time in 8 years, she wasn't trying to hold them up. She grabbed her coat and her keys. It was past midnight, and the subway would take 47 minutes, but she didn't care. Some things couldn't wait until morning. Dominic's penthouse was dark when she arrived, but the doorman recognized her and let her up without question. The elevator ride to the 63rd floor felt endless, 74 seconds that stretched into infinity. She knocked, then knocked again, then a third time, louder. The door opened. Dominic looked terrible, worse than terrible. He looked like a man who had given up on sleep, on food, on hope. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, his jaw shadowed with days of stubble. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, nothing like the polished billionaire she'd first met. Jennifer. Her name came out like a prayer. What are you? I thought... I listened to your voicemail, she said. I didn't think you would. Neither did I. She stepped past him into the apartment, her eyes finding the Claire Duval painting above the fireplace. Still there, still beautiful, still overlooked by a world that didn't know how to see it. Victoria came to see me, she said, turning to face him. She tried to convince me you were a monster, that you'd done this before, that I was just another victim in a long line of... Jennifer, I swear to you, I've never... I know. She held up a hand to stop him. I knew she was lying, not because I trust you. I'm not sure I know how to trust anyone anymore, but because I saw her face, I saw the fear. She's not trying to warn me, Dominic. She's trying to destroy you through me. He was quiet for a moment, processing. And you came here anyway. I came here because I needed to understand something. She moved closer, close enough to see the pain etched into every line of his face. When you planned to meet me, when you read those files and came to the restaurant knowing I'd be there, what were you hoping to find? I don't understand. What did you think would happen? Best case scenario. What did you want? He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. I wanted to meet someone real. Someone who hadn't been polished by money or corrupted by power. Someone who could look at me and see. Just me. Not the company. Not the headlines. Just the person underneath. And when we actually met, when I called out that scam artist in front of you, did you know then that I was the person you'd researched? Yes. The admission came out quiet, ashamed. But also no, because the woman in that file, the waitress with the art degree and the dead father and the student loans, she didn't capture you. Not even close. You were funny and fierce, and you didn't care that I could buy the entire restaurant. You just saw a tired guy in an expensive suit trying not to fall for a con. So why didn't you tell me? Later, after we started talking, after we started. Whatever this is. Why keep lying? Because I was terrified of exactly this. He gestured between them. Of you looking at me the way you looked at me in my office. Like I'd ruined everything. Like I was just another person who'd betrayed you. Jennifer felt something twist in her chest. You did betray me. I know. You let me fall in love with someone I didn't fully know. I know. And you might do it again. You might lie to protect yourself or hide things because you're scared, or... I might, he admitted. I'm not perfect. I'm broken in ways I'm still discovering. But Jennifer... He took her hands in his, and she let him. I spent 2 years after Victoria building walls so high I couldn't see over them. And then you came along and you climbed those walls like they were nothing. You saw through every defense I had. You made me feel things I'd convinced myself I wasn't capable of feeling anymore. That doesn't excuse... No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses what I did. He squeezed her hands gently. But it explains why I'm standing here at 2 in the morning, willing to spend the rest of my life earning back your trust, if you'll give me the chance. Jennifer looked at him, this broken, brilliant man who had hurt her and loved her, and somehow managed to be both the worst and best thing that had ever happened to her. My father, she said slowly, used to say that trust isn't something you give. It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice. It's never finished. It just keeps growing, as long as both people keep choosing to show up. I'll show up, Dominic said immediately. Every day for as long as you'll let me. No more lies. No more investigations. No more trying to control things because you're scared. No more. And if I need space, if I need to process something or just be alone, you respect that. You don't send 63 voicemails or hire someone to check on me or... I'll try. He winced. Okay, that was excessive, I know, I didn't know how else to show you I wasn't giving up. Jennifer felt a laugh bubble up in her chest, unexpected, inappropriate, and completely genuine. Dominic Ashford, the most powerful businessman in New York, reduced to leaving desperate voicemails like a teenager. I am a teenager when it comes to you. A hint of his old smile appeared. Completely out of my depth. Making mistakes I should know better than to make. Hoping against hope that you'll forgive me anyway. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jennifer said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I understand. But I'm willing to try. To stay. To see if we can build something real on top of everything that's happened. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't realized was falling. Is that enough? That's everything, he whispered. That's more than I deserve. She kissed him then, soft and slow, tasting of salt and hope and the beginning of something new. When they finally pulled apart, he was smiling. Actually smiling for the first time since she'd walked out of his office. Stay, he said. Please. Not for... Just stay. Sleep next to me. Let me know this is real when I wake up. Okay. And she did. 4 months later, Jennifer Torres stood in the middle of a small gallery in Brooklyn, surrounded by paintings that had never been seen before. The space was modest, 400 square feet of exposed brick and polished concrete, with track lighting that made every piece glow. The opening was in 3 hours, and she still had 1,000 things to do. Adjust the placement of the Duval, check the wine delivery, make sure the press releases had gone out. But right now she was just standing here, taking it in. The Torres Gallery, her gallery. A place for forgotten artists and overlooked masterpieces, exactly as she'd dreamed. It's perfect. Dominic appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. He was wearing jeans and a casual shirt, the uniform he'd adopted for gallery visits, a far cry from the Brioni suits of their first meeting. You did this. We did this, she corrected. You connected me with the investors. I opened a door, you walked through it, built a house, and invited the whole world inside. He kissed her temple. That's all you, Jennifer. She leaned into him, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. 4 months of rebuilding. 4 months of honest conversations and hard truths and moments where she wasn't sure they'd make it, but they had. They were making it. Are you nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. What if no one comes? What if they hate the art? What if... Then we'll figure it out together. He turned her to face him. That's what we do now, remember? No hiding, no running, we face things together. Together, she repeated, and the word felt different now than it had before. Fuller, more real. The opening was a success beyond her wildest dreams. 300 people came, art critics, collectors, curious neighbors from the block. The reviews would be glowing, though Jennifer wouldn't read them until the next morning because she'd been too busy living in the moment. 2 paintings sold that first night, including a piece by a young artist from the Bronx who'd been working as a janitor until Jennifer discovered her work on Instagram. By midnight, the crowd had thinned to a handful of stragglers. Jennifer was exhausted, her feet aching in the heels she'd sworn she'd never wear again after the gala, but she couldn't stop smiling. Come with me, Dominic said, taking her hand. There's something I want to show you. He led her to the back of the gallery, past the office she'd spent weeks decorating, to a small door she'd never noticed before. What is this? Open it. She pushed the door open and gasped. It was a tiny room, maybe 200 square feet, but every inch of it was covered with her father's things. The photographs she'd kept in boxes for 8 years, the carpenter's tools he'd used to build furniture for their tiny apartment, his handwritten recipes, framed and arranged in a grid on the wall, and in the center, on a simple wooden pedestal, the last piece he'd ever made, a small wooden box with her name carved into the lid. How did you... Your mother helped. Dominic's voice was soft. I asked her what she remembered about your father, what pieces of him you might want to have close. She sent me everything. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Dominic, I know you wanted this gallery to be about forgotten artists, about giving people a second chance to be seen. He moved to stand beside her, his hand warm on her back. But you were so focused on everyone else that you forgot the artist who mattered most, the man who raised you to do beautiful things. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. All she could do was stand there, surrounded by her father's memory, and let the tears fall. This is the Miguel Torres Memorial Room, Dominic continued. It's not for the public, just for you. A place to come when you need to remember where you started, who believed in you first. Jennifer turned and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. I love you, she managed between sobs. I love you so much. I love you too. He held her tight, his chin resting on top of her head. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me. 3 months later, Jennifer woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of rain against the windows of Dominic's penthouse. Their penthouse now, though she still wasn't used to thinking of it that way. She reached across the bed, her fingers finding the warmth where he'd been sleeping moments before. You're supposed to be resting, she called out, her voice still thick with sleep. He appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs in hand, wearing the old NYU t-shirt she'd given him, the one she'd bought at the campus bookstore 9 years ago, before everything changed. I made breakfast, he said. Well, I tried. The eggs are creative. She laughed, that same laugh he'd fallen in love with in a French restaurant 11 months ago, when he was pretending to be someone else, and she was the only real thing in his world. Come here, she said, patting the bed beside her. He climbed in, careful not to spill the coffee, and handed her a mug. They sat there in comfortable silence, listening to the rain, watching the city wake up 63 floors below. I have something for you, Dominic said finally. "I know you said no expensive gifts, but this isn't expensive." "Not really." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Jennifer's heart stopped. "Before you panic, it's not what you think." He opened the box to reveal not a ring, but a key, old brass, slightly tarnished. "This is the key to my family's cabin in Vermont, the place my mother used to take me when I was small, before she got sick. I haven't been there in 22 years. Dominic, I want to go back. With you. I want to build new memories in a place that used to be full of old pain." He met her eyes. "And someday, not now, not until you're ready, I want to ask you a different question with a different box. But for now, I just want to give you this. A key to my past. A promise of our future." Jennifer took the key, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to carry so much meaning. "Yes," she said. "Yes to the cabin. Yes to everything." She set down her coffee and kissed him, soft and slow, tasting of morning and hope and all the ordinary miracles they'd built together. Yes to whatever comes next. Some mornings, she still couldn't believe this was her life. But then he'd kiss her forehead or burn the eggs, or say something that made her roll her eyes, and she'd remember, this wasn't a fairy tale, this was better, this was real.